T.S. Eliot questioned, why do people love the church? The church teaches about sin and death and subjects we would rather avoid. Harsh subjects to address anytime, but particularly so when the church calendar aligns with the secular calendar, so that Ash Wednesday, that day when we remember our mortality, falls on Valentine's Day, a day that we're asked to set aside and extol the beauty of human love and celebrate it with dinner out or a special dessert or treat or chocolate. To fast or to feast? That is the question. We don't relish hearing about mortality anytime, but the dilemma is heightened on these years when St. Valentine's Day falls on Ash Wednesday, and they compete for our attention on that same day. Of course, we would rather, always rather, talk of love than death. Who wouldn't? But the tension represents what is indicative of our discomfort, and that is we tend to want to avoid our mortality rather than confront it. We will die unless we're in that generation living when Christ returns. There's an old saying included often in funerals, in the midst of life, we are in death. Death is part of this life, part of the human condition. But not everyone has the luxury to ignore death. They live under its shadow and sense its unrelenting approach. Warren's nephew Dan and his wife Janelle, about 3.5 years ago, almost, learned that she was expecting a child. They had 2 little girls, twins that were about 3 years old at the time, and they were so excited to welcome a child into their home. And Janelle is a nurse, and so she did all of the prenatal things exactly as prescribed. But after several months, when she went in for a sonogram, the doctors were concerned, and they didn't say anything at that time. They said further tests were needed. It happened that this child that she was carrying only had half of a heart. And the half that it had was badly damaged. And so she asked about heart transplants, and she called Boston Children's Hospital and Philadelphia Children's Hospital and all of those places saying, what can be done? Will she be on a heart transplant list as soon as she's born? But she also has a rare form of Down syndrome, and so no hospital said that they could do it. They said, when she is born, have everyone that you want to meet her and say goodbye to her in the room. And so she carried to term, and when she was about to give birth, she invited her family to all be there to both meet and to say goodbye to this little girl with half a heart. She was expected to live just a couple of hours, or maybe up to 6 or 7 hours, they thought, but she lived through the night. And then the next day, everyone stayed waiting to say goodbye, and she still was breathing and living on her own. And after about a week, they decided to go home with hospice care in their home and let the other children in the family, the twins, say their goodbyes to her. And so they took her home. And every Friday, they had a birthday cake because they recognized this may be her last week. So every Friday night, their family celebrated with a birthday party. Appreciation for every moment of life, but living under a shadow, knowing that death was probably imminent. An appreciation for life that is just born out of the fact that we are mortal and we know that life is precious because it won't last forever. They named the baby Grace, And the doctors and medical teams call her Amazing Grace because they have no idea how she survived. And Amazing Grace is 2.5 years old. And no one can understand how her heart pumps enough a damaged half heart to keep her living. If you happen to go to Village Gate, either for dinner or shopping, if you go back to the furthest parking lot, there is an agency back there that works with children with disabilities, movement and dance, and there is probably a 20 or 25-foot tall poster of Grace by the door. You can see her. She's the one that has a Pebbles Flintstone hairdo in that. Grace is still living, but they live under the shadow of death because the doctors say that they don't know as she grows and her body is bigger if this little half of a heart is enough to pump out blood and circulation to her extremities. So the questions are still there, and they still live under that shadow. Death is a hard subject, but some people are living under it every day as they recognize today might be the day. And we begin this season thinking about things we would rather put out of our minds. Isn't it morbid to talk about death? And is it necessary that we talk about this? Yes, it is necessary. Because the good news of all that God has done for us in Jesus starts with the bad news that we, all of us, have faulty hearts. And the prognosis is grim. The prognosis is death. But we are told to number our days so that we might gain a heart that has wisdom in it. Our diseased hearts may trick us into trying to create our own devised cures, like outwardly displaying religious rituals like fasting or prayer or charity for show. But a heart that is sick spiritually can only serve itself, not God and not others. So something much deeper is needed. We gather together to begin the Lenten journey with an honest self-assessment. Without God, all is lost. We will leave here not wearing a sign of our holiness or piety, but our need. Only God can create in us whole and cleansed and healed hearts. As the psalm for this evening that Rajiv sang for us said, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me." There's no need to put on a show of piety, because as the psalm also says, the sacrifices God accepts are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. These, O God, you will not despise. God meets us where hearts are broken. I admit it gives me pause to mark with ashes a sign of your mortality on your being. It does. When children come forward, it's hard to do that. Those that are undergoing cancer treatments or long illnesses, it's hard to do that. But a verse from the Song of Solomon comes to mind and has captured the imagination of poets throughout the centuries. Love is as strong as death. We mark with ashes, but we mark in the shape of the cross, and that is where hope lies. If we came together only to recall that we will die, then that is hopeless, and that is morbid, and that is cruel. But we place upon you, and in return, we receive also a sign of hope, the cross of Christ in the ashes. Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And the cross speaks, love is stronger than death. Love has overcome death by dying in our place. We bring to God our hearts in need of healing, and we wear our brokenness with great hope. Because in Christ, love and death have met in the cross. And dear friends, love has won. And that is amazing grace. May our Lenten journeys lead us deeper and deeper into that grace, into that life for our mortality, into all that God has planned for us as we move forward in this season of transformation.